When it comes to roadside Americana, there are few things on a higher pedestal than diners. Simultaneously mass produced and individual, these eateries have been serving locals and passers through across the country for well over a century, and their various looks, settings, and signage draw the eye like nothing else. I encourage you to go back to early March. March is my favorite diner time of the year, to hear part one of Scott of Diner Day in the USA and I breaking down diners, both collectively as documents of the first half of the 20th century and individually as primary sources of their respective settings. Admittedly, part two does contain its share of us gushing about our favorite diners and the meals that they serve, but if you frequent one yourself, I think you'll forgive us. For there is something really special about grabbing a booth or a spot at the counter, flipping the ceramic mug over for coffee, and waiting for some comfort food while taking in the ambiance of a diner.
So before we get back into talking diners and things, maybe since initially this is for a little extra information for folks, what prompted the Instagram page Diner Day in the USA?
Yeah, I've always had a personal Instagram account, and every so often I put my trips to diners on there, along with other kind of just random stuff from my life. And my wife said, have you thought about just like doing just a diner page? And hadn't really thought of I'm like, well, I guess. And and so I actually started, and I think what's funny is, again, going back to my days of being in Lehigh Valley and trips with my parents, and we would always go to like a Stewart's Drive-In. I don't know if you've ever experienced a Stewart's Drive-In.
In upstate New York, there's a Stewart's. But it's not the same, right?
Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of travel up in upstate New York, so I've seen these Stewart shops.
Yeah,
it's different from the Stewart root beer shops that I was familiar with back when I was growing up. So we would always stop at these on the way out to Western Pennsylvania. This Stewart root beer, kind of almost like a drive-in.
So kind of like an A&W.
Yeah, kind of like an A&W. Yeah, and so we would stop there. So my first post, if you look, is a place in New Jersey that's a Stewart. So it's kind of a diner. So, but it's not really kind of a diner. It's more like a drive-in, so I think, when I started, I wasn't sure how to do it, what to do. Right. And so over time, it kind of evolved into, okay, what's the brand? Like, what do I want to do with this? Right. Am I doing restaurants? Am I doing diners? What classifies as a diner? It's kind of evolved over time. But it is kind of funny that my first picture on the Instagram account is
my first diner picture. It's not
right. It's not necessarily a diner. It's kind of a drive-in. Yeah. But it kind of the same sort of thing. It's a nostalgia, vintage sort of thing. So that took place back in 2000, not that long ago, 2019. And that was right before the pandemic.
Right.
So I started content right before the pandemic started, and then everything was shut down. So it was
including diners.
Right. Yeah. Especially diners. Diners got hit really, really hard, with all the state restrictions and other things that places just wouldn't be open.
They couldn't easily transform it into to-go food right away.
No, some put places outside, tables and chairs.
It's a weird thing at a diner to be. I did it a few times. I'm like, this isn't right. Like,
right. No, totally is. So, since 2019. And so I started just to follow people who share the same interests.
Yeah.
With diners, kind of paintings, artwork, signs, neon, travel. So I started just following a whole bunch of diners, but then I realized that there's a whole bunch of people who are really into diners, and those are the people that I got to learn.
Yeah.
What do they like to post? What do they like? What are their interests? And so I've gotten to learn a lot about just photography, how to kind of frame things, kind of a before and after, say a daylight shot and then a nighttime shot of the same thing. So in the same post, you have a post in Marietta, Georgia, of a diner that is full neon, and then during the day, it's kind of, you would never know.
Right, it looks like any other.
Right, it's like any other place. So it's really taken a while. So I'm up to about 1,600 followers so far.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's, last couple of months has actually been quite good. Kind of a lot of new followers over the last couple months, just with the recent posts that I've had.
I think it's almost like the aesthetic that so many of those diners have and is just so appealing to people. Definitely when we couldn't go to them. That's probably one reason why, is because people will spend a lot of their time. I wouldn't know anybody personally like this who just spent a lot of time on the internet the whole time. But scrolling scrolling through and be like, oh, I like the way that looks. There's just something so even if it was nostalgia for a time period you never experienced, like it's just so like nice and like so I guarantee you that there's so many people that stumble across something like that, and like me, and that's how I stumbled across it. I'm like,
yeah,
this is nice. Like this is just I think it was suggested.
Appreciate that.
I have I've been recently following other vintage kind of Instagram things, and did a episode a few weeks ago with Rolando Pujol, who's the retrologist.
Awesome. He's absolutely awesome.
He was just fantastic. We did an episode about Holiday Inn and Hojo's. Yeah.
Yes.
And it was just like, it was same kind of thing. We're like, we might not have actually experienced this in our lifetimes, but we, like you said, starting out with when you were a kid, it was like you were like given this, like we inherited this wonderful world of that those kinds of restaurants and hotels and motels and systems and ways of doing things. And we've watched a lot of them go away, but we've been able to preserve the ones that we like a lot. And so even if these places are eventually going to the wayside, at least we can enjoy their appearances for a little bit longer thanks to the Instagram.
Shout out to him, because we've DM back and forth, and one of the places I grew up going to is Arthur Treacher's.
Oh yeah,
it's like a fish and chips place. And not many of them around, but he had sent me some pictures of some of his Arthur Treacher's places. It's just he's an amazing source of just vintage retro stuff. It's amazing.
Ponderosa is now considered
Ponderosa,
retro now, but I'm like, it is America's Roadside, and
it is
so it does count. And for my show's point of view, these are all products. These are all artifacts.
Right.
They're all reflections of the society and the times in which they were made, and subsequently when they have they do influence throughout. Like my wife and I, we met when we were going to school in central New York, right on the shores of Lake Ontario in Oswego, New York, and there's some great diners in Oswego. Last time we were back was last spring, and unfortunately our favorite one was no more. The Ritz, I mean, that's a diner name. And there was Wade's. That was a classic diner. As soon as you walk in, there's the flat top grill. The cook is actually looking at you, and like plate size pancakes,
nice.
It's fantastic. But it was, we were, poor college kids, didn't have a lot of money, but any night of the week that we didn't want, the food at the dining hall or something like that, like, let's go to a diner, and all we would need is $20. I would cover it, which
right.
sounds like a lot in traditional diner, terminology, but for us that was affordable, and we could get a full meal and drinks and everything. I would always have my coffee and my omelet, and that's how you could get it done. So and I think the audience, to go back to the form that I have, has kind of maintained itself throughout. Wouldn't you say that it's never really gone away from, diners collectively as a group have generally existed for, not the poor and destitute, but definitely not the rich and well-to-do.
No, they're a staple, right there. If you need a quick meal, you know where to go.
Right.
And a lot of these businesses, and you know from your time that you probably spent up in Oswego, New York, and upstate New York, and those diners, they've been family run for years.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes they'll just pass through generation to generation, that it's just the way. And most of them are owned by Greek families.
Right.
As it turns out, there, almost a whole bunch of the ones that I follow are owned by just wonderful Greek families, just generation over generation.
Mm-hmm.
And because they understand the history, they understand the value to their customers, they understand why they're there, and they're there to serve their community. They're there to serve their patrons who come in and expect a good meal. And that's what it's about.
And a lot of it goes back to, the first Greek families that owned those restaurants. A lot of them were themselves immigrants.
Yes.
And that era of, I'm thinking Greek immigration, early 20th century, a lot of them fleeing the wars of the, former Ottoman Empire, and trying to get to the country, anywhere, coming to the United States, for that reason. And they had that motivation of, like we were saying before, let's start my own business. And that also here in New England runs pretty deep with the pizza parlors too. Like any pizza house is almost guaranteed to be a Greek family that runs it. And that attitude of like, I am going to make my place in this new world. I'm going to, make my mark and have my own business and everything like that. And a lot of the Greek recipes will show up on those diner menus, and it like confirms, like, yes, this is a Greek family that runs it, because they have, the Greek
Slovaki,
recipe. Right? They always have
the baklava,
they'll make sure it's there.
The
gyro, feta cheese, and the hero, and they'll have
the
it there. But sometimes they even have the Greek section of the menu, like the back page.
Absolutely do.
But they also know that not everybody's there for that, and so they'll have pancakes and waffles and eggs and all the normal breakfast stuff. Breakfast all day.
Look, if they have patty melts, I'm all in.
Yes.
You give me a patty melt, that's my go-to. Or in breakfast, it's 2 eggs over easy with hash browns and toast.
Yes.
And you can throw in some bacon in there too. But yeah.
I think about, so you were saying before about is it a diner? Is it a drive-in? Is it, I guess we could throw in the word dive and think of Guy Fieri.
Yeah.
He did that program for a while, and I don't know if he still does on Food Network.
I think so. Yeah.
Where he would visit one of those kinds of establishments, however categorized. And boy, when I'd watch those shows, I was just like, I want to be there. I want, especially the diners. Right. I'm like, I need to have a cup of coffee. And it's funny because like at home, like I was saying before about, preparing food, trying to be like a diner. When I'm at home, my coffee is black. I don't put anything in it. But when I go to a diner, it's always, I put one cream, and it's just like, that's your diner. That's your diner coffee. Yeah. I can't. And it's funny like that. So whenever he's visiting it, and the main diner up in Wells is one of the places that he's visited, and they'll let you know that as soon as you walk in.
Yes.
There's lots of but they have that kind of I what I like about that diner is, if we were to answer all the questions for the main diner, it would probably hit a lot of the same answers as all the other ones, but they also have very local food. Like there's lobster in like 3 or 4 places on the menu. There's going to be blueberries, fresh blueberries in their pancakes, and they are the main diner. That's their whole thing. And and if a place can get away with a Spanish American War slogan as their gift shop, then that's pretty good. I always like, remember the main. That's there. But they answer those questions. But I would say that nowadays, and probably for a long time in that particular diner's history, their intended audience isn't necessarily longshoremen going off to or lobstermen getting ready. It's the tourists.
It's tourists
in summertime. Yep, it lines out the door, and as soon as you drive through that section of Wells, you're like, yep. I'm not going there.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I've stopped there. I stopped there once, and lobster roll. I mean, they do it right.
Yes.
Right. So I've had numerous lobster rolls. Theirs is very good. Their fish chowder and their clam chowder we had very, very good. And it kind of checks all the boxes off for kind of just a really good diner.
Yeah.
Right. And at the far end, it has one of those neon clocks.
Right.
That says the main diner. So look, I'm always about the neon clocks too.
Yeah.
If they have a neon clock, even on one of my Instagram posts, I put all these clocks from all these different diners around. So, and actually main diner is one of them within that series of photos. So really, really fun.
Where do you think, when so many of these diners went all in on neon, what do you think was the motivator behind that? Was just so that it would stand out in the nighttime,
I mean, I
to
think
match so many of the other businesses that were doing it?
Yeah, good question. I really like to do a little bit more digging on that idea. I mean, my thought is that along with the chrome, with neon, it's just gonna pop so bright,
Right.
and really trying to grab people's attention from the road, from the highway or from the roadway, whatever it is. It just kind of they just kind of go together. I'm just thinking back on some of these places that I've stopped at. One in Milford, Pennsylvania, Village Diner in Milford. And they have a beautiful neon sign, beautiful chrome kind of exterior. It just kind of pops. So I my thought is it's just a way of saying, come here,
right?
This is the place.
And I think they also kind of use it as a way to communicate what their status is in society, just kind of be like, once again, in the daytime you could see it clear as day that it's like I said before, just kind of a greasy spoon, you're gonna get what you get, kind of thing. It's gonna be good, it's not gonna be and it's you get what you pay for kind of thing. And at night, it's not, you don't want to be expecting fine dining. It's just like, oh yeah, look at that place, it's lit up just like a casino. It's lit up just like the motel right across the street from it.
That's right.
They go hand in hand. So it's all that mid 20th century wordless communication that they can get across just from the signs. And having the clock in there also tells you, I mean, because most restaurants don't have clocks, that tells you something about their at least traditional clientele, is that people are looking at the clock. They got to make sure that they can get their food and dash off to work, or on back on the road, because they're traveling and they don't want to waste any time.
And some of those, going back to kind of the prefab diners, these Jerry O'Mahony diners, they're right in the middle. So when you come into right through the middle of the diner, right at the entrance to the back, where it goes in the back, sometimes they have a kitchen in the front, but some in the back where they maybe do like food prep and other stuff. There's always a clock right up there. Like in those sorts of diners, they always have those clocks up there.
Right.
So they're so it's just part of how they were made. That's where the clock was. But other places they have a neon clock and with their insignia or whatever it is, and they'll put it on.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about the diners? I know we've all been to them that seem to kind of go over the top with the 1950s rock and roll. It's almost like they're trying to be one of those paintings where Marilyn Monroe and Elvis,
like over the top,
are all hanging out together. It's like they have the jukebox going. I'm like, when I go into some places like that, they almost seem like themed. It's a bit of a turnoff for me anyway. Up in Montreal, there's a chain of them called Nichols, and I think Celine Dion either used to or still is like the owner of them. And because they always had a picture of her in the doorway. And it was like that, whereas like only 50s music playing all the time, and there's like a picture everywhere of like there's James Dean and over there, and it was just like all the booths looked like 57 Chevrolets, and it was just like, okay, we get it. Like this is like, to me, I like it so much when I walk into a diner and it's not trying so hard to remind me I'm in a diner.
I'm kind of the same way. I think that places will just kind of go over the top for those people who maybe don't travel, right? They just hear about diners, and they but I'm all about kind of the low key kind of diners, and I get why they want to do that, because they want to kind of show it off. They want to kind of go over the top, maybe a little bit too much tchotchke. but they're trying to make it very diner,
Right.
very much a diner. And you're like, you could probably scale that back 50% and still be
Yeah.
a really good diner. But
Because
yeah,
what's funny to me is like I don't think teenagers in the 50s really hung out at diners all that much. Like some of them maybe worked at a diner, but they would usually go to like the pizza parlor or the somewhere
ice
there's
cream shop.
room to dance. Like maybe I'm being too cliche about them too, but it just like I don't. To me, diner like my I think I can say honestly my all-time favorite work of art is Nighthawks. The diner scene in the city where you just see like the guy getting the coffee ready and there's a couple of
That's
one,
that's right.
that is just to me that's what I look for. When I
Yeah.
think of diner, and there's nothing better in my opinion. I know you've been there before too where you're like
Mm.
it's 10:30 at night, you're driving, you're getting tired, but you're not quite ready to, give it up for the night. You're like, okay, I'm just gonna have a late supper, and you go into some diner, and you're like one of three people there, and it's just like the best.
Well, it's funny. There was a place that's exactly what happened to me. I was kind of in this situation where I was traveling between Pittsburgh and Altoona, Pennsylvania, and it's about, I don't know, hour and a half to almost 2 hours between the two, and kind of in the middle is this place, Dean's Diner. And so I was traveling kind of from Altoona to Pittsburgh, and I knew that this place was open, and it was late. It was probably like 11:30 at night, and I had that sense of what you're talking about, that I
Mhm.
envisioned that picture in my mind. And there I was sitting at the counter, and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna have coffee and some pie. That's what I'm
Oh,
gonna do. I'm just gonna have coffee. And the waitress was so frazzled. I said, you know what? I just want some of that pie over there and a coffee. That's all I want. And she said, that's all you want, honey? I'm like, that's all I want. And I'll be on
and
my way.
thank you for
And,
responding me with honey. That just
right,
made
I
it
know.
like
Well,
it's like
that exactly.
it's the ultimate diner
11:30 at
experience.
night. And then when I stepped out of the place, it's so there's not much around
Mhm.
this particular diner. So it's so dark. And when you're taking pictures from the outside looking in, it just has this appearance of that picture you
Yeah,
mentioned.
so cozy and just like
Yeah,
yeah.
that coziness.
And
So
that's just something that really cannot be replicated with
no,
the franchised restaurants and
can't.
those kinds of I think there was, I don't know if it exists anymore. For a while they had a soda jerk, like a ice cream parlor slash diner called Johnny Rockets,
Yes.
that chain, and the paper
Hmm.
hats and everything. And then every 10 minutes they would all dance on the counter, and to whatever jukebox song came on. And I'm like, yeah, that's
I
like
know.
somebody that just kind of took one aspect of it and said, yeah, we're gonna make it the attraction, instead of like, no, I'm being attracted by the quietness of it, I'm being attracted by
That's right.
the simplicity. That's the attractive nature of it, and that's probably always been there. I guarantee you that's why so many people have made it their community hub, like you were
Yeah.
saying before, where it's like that's where people and emanate from and to at the beginning and end of every day is the diner. And, there's so much that it says without having to
Yeah.
elevate the decor to look like Elvis's living room or something.
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's so before we depart, um best diner you've ever been to, what would you say is the best diner?
Oh, that's such a hard question. I know we talked about Palace a lot. That is really one of my favorites. I think, I'll just go nostalgic, and I'll just say City View Diner, because look, I grew up there
Mm.
in Pennsylvania. It kind of sits on top of a hill, overlooks kind of Allentown. Um, there's so much has changed
Mhm.
in that area, but yet the City View Diner remains. So I'd say City View Diner, just from a nostalgic point of view. Probably the next time I'm down there, I'll probably go back there. Every time in Lehigh Valley, I always stop in the
Yeah.
City View Diner.
Is it cash only? Do they still just take cash, or
No, not that one.
they?
Is that one you can use credit cards, but
Okay.
yeah, like Palace, yeah, the ATM is outside, so
Right.
you can get some cash. But look, I've been to a bunch of places in California, in San Francisco, awesome diners out in California, St. Louis, New Orleans. I was just in New Orleans recently. I've been in New Orleans like 2 or 3 times, and amazing places down in New Orleans. So, but I'll just say City View just to make it.
That's fair enough. And
because the Rainbow Diner is no longer there.
Yeah, so you can't
but,
say that one, but
right
at the end of the rainbow, now,
that's right.
Is the City View.
Yes.
And well, Scott, I can't thank you enough for the quick turnaround. It was like diner time that I ordered my request, and it came within about a day and a half. We were able to do this.
It's perfect.
That was just perfect. So thank you for joining me on the Everything is a Primary Source podcast.
You're very welcome.
Everything, including diners, is a primary source, and people can find you on Instagram at Diner Day in the USA,
and Twitter
and
Facebook. But it's primarily Instagram, and I'll post to all 3 platforms primarily.
Instagram is the place to be.
Instagram is kind of the place.
I love it. Just picture, caption. You don't need to do anything else.
It's almost like a mini blog, right?
It absolutely is.
And I'll put pictures up there, have some history behind it, maybe what I experienced there. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah. And probably the best feature that brings it all together to the diners is the hashtag that, it will suggest things to you, or if you're looking for something. And that's what diners have always done, is like they are the hashtags of the Great American Road, because as you're driving around, if you see that sign that says Joe's Diner or Betty's or whatever,
that's right,
you're almost guaranteed that that's going to be a good place, that you should
that's
stop
right
there and enjoy a good meal, even if it adds a little bit more extra time instead of stopping at McDonald's. So exactly. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to the.
You're so very welcome. It was a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Don't hesitate to check out both of us on Instagram, Diner Day in the USA, as well as the EPS podcast. Check me out online, www.everything-history.com. We'll talk to you next time on the Everything is a Primary Source podcast, Part-2-Palooza.